All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. If you can move to the next slide, please. All right. So today's session is being interpreted in ASL in Spanish. I'm going to turn it over to our Spanish interpreters now to provide instructions as to how people can listen in via the Spanish channel. So Andrea or one of you, if you wouldn't mind taking it from here.
Thank you, Gretchen, and welcome everyone. My name is Sandra, and I am with my co-interpreter, Andrea. We will be the Spanish interpreters for today. And also, as it was mentioned, there will be American Sign Language interpretation available. I am going to give you some instructions to access the interpretation feature, and we will do this in English and Spanish. So please bear with us for a minute. Hola, buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Sandra, estoy con mi cointérprete Andrea y vamos a ser los intérpretes el día de hoy de español. También hay interpretación en lengua de señas estadounidense disponible, así que les vamos a dar algunas instrucciones para acceder a esta característica. Entonces, si se están uniendo desde su computadora en el centro inferior de su pantalla, encontrarán un icono de globo terráqueo. Si no está ahí, está en el botón de 3 puntos que dice More o más. Abran la opción de interpretación de idiomas, elijan español y asegúrense de no silenciar el audio original si quieren oír el audio de la sala. Si solamente quieren escuchar la voz de los intérpretes, pueden elegir silenciar audio original. So if you're joining from a computer, please go to the bottom of your screen, and at the center you should find a globe icon with the word interpretation below. If it's not in the bottom of your screen, you might find it in the 3-dotted menu with the words more. It's language interpretation. Then choose English to access the English channel, and make sure to not mute original audio or you won't be able to hear the main room. Si están uniéndose desde un dispositivo móvil, pueden hacer tap ligeramente en su pantalla y en el menú de 3 puntos que dice More o más, encontrarán la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Hagan clic en español y presionen listo o done para activar la característica. If you're joining from a mobile device, you can find the feature if you tap lightly on your screen, go to the 3-dotted menu that says More, and then choose English and press Done. Once again, do not mute original audio or you won't be able to hear the main room. If you have any trouble accessing this feature, please feel free to leave a message in the chat for us and we will be happy to assist. Si tienen algún problema accediendo a esta característica, por favor déjenos un mensaje en el chat y con gusto podremos apoyarles. And with this, we'll go back to Gretchen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. All right. Thank you. So Jake, I have a question. Did we set the ASL interpreters up on a separate channel? And has Autumn been let in?
Yes, so they are set as the ASL interpreters. And so I am able to view her when I have selected a American Sign Language in my interpretation section.
Okay. Autumn, if you could let me know if you are on as well, I'd appreciate that. And bear with us, everyone. Sometimes these technical issues pop up. Okay, she's here. Very good. Okay, so for those listening in or who would like to watch the ASL interpreters, please join under the globe icon in American Sign Language. We also have at least one pinned to the screen here as well, but we'll carry on. All right, welcome. Again, my name is Gretchen Shaw. I'm the Vice President of Programs here at the Hotline, one of the programs that I have the pleasure to work closely with team members on is Love is Respect. I'm going to take a few minutes just to move through some housekeeping slides and start first with this disclaimer. So we just need to share that the opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed at this live event and webinars are those of the authors and the participants, and they do not necessarily reflect the views of the Administration for Children and Families and the Office on Family Violence Prevention Services. So we are grateful for their support, but do need to specify that. Next slide, please. All right. Again, I'm the Vice President of Programs here at the Hotline, and we're thrilled to have you here. Again, I'm just going to move through some housekeeping slides. If you can, yes, move to the next slide. Thanks so much. So just to give you a brief overview of Love is Respect, Love is Respect is a project of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We're the nation's only youth-focused resource addressing relationship abuse 24/7 via the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. So some may not be aware that we are one and the same. So we support teens and young adults with questions or concerns about their relationships by providing free and confidential crisis intervention, education, and support via phone, text, and chat 365 days of the year, 24/7. We also provide assistance and information to concerned friends and family members and loved ones, other service providers, and anyone who may be looking to support a young person in their life around the issue of healthy relationships and domestic violence. All right. So yes, this session is being interpreted in ASL and Spanish. We're also recording it. That recording will be sent to registrants within 7 business days following the close of this session, and we'll be hosting it on the YouTube channel. We encourage you to use the chat function throughout the session. So please share information. You're welcome to post questions. I don't think today is going to allow as much time to open it up to Q&A, but we'll share our email address where you can reach out to us directly. And we can answer your questions following. Also know that you'll be prompted to complete a short survey following this session. So please take a moment to fill that out. We appreciate that. All right, next slide. So we welcome today's speaker. They are members of our wonderful youth council. We have Kate Necki, who has been with the Love is Respect Youth Council since 2020, and she's from Chicago, Illinois. Deb Coffey has been with the Youth Council since 2024, and she lives in Orlando. Ling Pace has been with us since 2023. She lives in Illinois, and Kat McClendon has been with us since 2022, and she lives in Utah. All right, next slide, please. We're excited and welcome our wonderful moderators for today. So thank you to Miss Alexis Smith, who is 2024 Miss Kansas. Alexis is a graduate of Newman University, and she has a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. She currently works as a cardiothoracic intensive care nurse. I hope I said that right. And her community service initiative is called Respect Reclaimed, advocating for healthy relationships, which focuses on raising awareness about unhealthy and abusive relationships by educating individuals on recognizing abuse and promoting healthy relationship behaviors. So we're so happy to have her with us today. Also, our wonderful Angela Lee, who is the director of Love is Respect, will serve as one of the moderators. Angela has been with the hotline for over 14 years. Angela, remind me if it's more than that. Prior to being the director of Love is Respect, she served as a phone service advocate and a program service manager. But Angela has a very long history of working in the social justice field, and she has been involved with everything from substance abuse to behavioral health to sexual assault and working with at-risk youth. So I'm going to turn the session over now to Angela and Alexis. I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself and attend to some of these questions that are coming through the chat. So Angela and Alexis and to our youth council members, thank you so much, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Gretchen. We really appreciate that. Everyone can hear me, correct? Just doing a sound check. I would think that means yes. Okay, we're really excited. First of all, thank you so much for everyone who's joining this webinar. You know, the topic of our webinar is breaking the silence and like empowering youth to speak up and support each other. We're joined with our amazing youth council. I just cannot speak enough about the youth council members. We started off with 7 members. We currently have 41, covering over 19 states. I'm really excited to be sharing space with Alexis. And without further ado, basically this is going to be a Q&A. We're going to ask the youth council members questions. Unfortunately, we will not have time to do a Q&A, but we never know how the webinar goes. If we have time, just drop some questions in the chat, and if we can, we will definitely answer them. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to my co-moderator, Alexis Smith.
Hi, I'm Alexis Smith, your Miss Kansas 2024. Super excited to be here today. For those that don't know, I advocate on the behalf of domestic violence, recognizing that my story starts at the early age of 14. And so any opportunity that I have to talk with other teenagers and young people about dating abuse and be able to share my story, it means everything to be able to create that impact. So I'm super excited to be on this platform and talk with young people about what they're doing in their communities to continue to spread awareness on dating abuse. I believe the questions start with me. Are we ready? You ready?
We're ready. It starts with you. Youth council members, you ready? Awesome.
Perfect. Okay, so today we're talking about breaking the silence. For me, this year it has been big, breaking my silence on something that started at the age of 14 years old, and I'm now 25, just now speaking up about my own personal abuse. So that's what makes it important to me. But what about breaking the silence and dating abuse makes it important to you, and why do you speak up for young people?
Who do you want to start with?
Well, Ling, first one to say on that.
All right. So to me, breaking the silence about dating abuse means using your voice to stand up for yourself and for others. It means working to stop the stigma and combat the stereotypes that surround dating abuse. I believe that when you break the silence, you're doing one of the most courageous things you can do because you are choosing to fight. You're choosing to stand up in the middle of this huge crowd that just wants to keep you quiet. And it's important for young people to speak up so that not only their stories can be heard, but others can be encouraged to share theirs. And speaking up and out against dating abuse is a way to take back control. It's a way to let abusers know that you don't control me anymore. I'm no longer going to stay silent about what you did to me, and I'm going to take back this part of my life.
I think you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. That was very powerful. Thank you for sharing. How about you, Kat?
Yeah, for me, breaking the silence gives us so many more options to be able to actively help. We cannot solve a problem that we're unaware of. And so by speaking up and breaking the silence, we are not only able to help solve the problem, but we're also able to give more resources, and we're able to build community. And while that's kind of a hard and unfortunate thing to build community around, the more support we have and the more people that we can relate to, the easier something can be to talk about, to process, and to eventually overcome. And that's what will, excuse me, that's what will help lead to empowerment and more personal fulfillment and happiness, which is ultimately our goal. And that none of that can happen if we are hiding and if we are keeping things under wraps, because if we really want to find solutions, we have to bring the problems to light.
And I love how you mentioned the importance of bringing it together as a community, because ultimately one person can't do it alone, especially with how significant this issue truly is. How about you, Deb?
Yeah, I think when it comes to breaking the silence, it's just so crucial for us to really amplify survivors who are youth, who are teenagers, who are young adults. I feel that sometimes there's not enough awareness that's being passed, and I feel like with our council, we have the opportunity to do that. And youth deserve to have resources and support from their communities to truly just have their voices heard and to really have a community that will be around them to support them through whatever struggles are going on.
Yes, and this is such a great community and platform that you all have found. What has been your experience, Kate?
Yeah, I think like most of us in this field, we come to this work because of a personal experience or someone that we know that has gone through an unhealthy or abusive relationship. And so I love this theme and this topic because I think breaking the silence really means creating an environment where dating abuse is acknowledged and discussed openly rather than being ignored or swept under the rug. And I think it's important too because as we've kind of touched on, silence can really enable abuse to continue. And it can also make victims feel isolated or ashamed or unsupported. And so being able to speak up helps others who might be going through similar situations or experiences really feel less alone and really empower them to take action. And so, again, I think this is so important because really bringing awareness to the issue allows more people to learn about the warning signs and also the impacts that dating abuse can have on young people.
Perfect. I know today I had the honor of traveling to a smaller community in Kansas, sharing my story, and one of the young girls that came up to me surprised many of the different teachers and counselors because she's someone that doesn't really speak up. But she was strong enough after I shared my story to enter my space and share her story with me. So what are some of those main reasons why you think other young people stay silent about their abuse and their experience of witnessing abuse? We'll just go back and rotate and lean.
So speaking from personal experience, some of the reasons why young people stay silent, why I stay silent about experiencing or witnessing dating abuse, include the fear of not being believed and then the uncertainty of how other people may respond. And so for me, that fear that people wouldn't believe me and not knowing how, other people in my community would respond to me kept me silent for a long time. When I was experiencing dating abuse, I was going to school in a small town, and anyone who frequents in a small town, everyone knows everyone, and word spreads quickly. So I think that applies to a lot of young people who have either experienced or witnessed dating abuse, especially, small town people. You're worried about who it's going to get around to, what they're going to say.
And that definitely highlights how different demographics and spaces can definitely contribute to the different barriers that we as individuals face with even seeking help and resources. How about you?
Yeah, I know that in my specific instance, I did not speak up because I didn't know. I had no idea what was happening to me. I really didn't. And I just thought that was my life. I just thought it was normal. And it wasn't until I started talking about my experience and until other people were like, hey, this is not okay, I was like, oh. And so I think that's one of the reasons why awareness is so important and events like this are so important, is because people could be in awful situations, but if that's all they know and if that's their normal, they might not have any idea that they're even in a place to ask for help or that they need help. And So while there are definitely a lot of reasons why people who do know that they need help don't ask for it, I think it's also important for us to acknowledge the people who might not even know that they need help.
That's a good point. And really all facets of life, being able to identify what that healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationship looks like. That way you know how to navigate those relationships and spaces as well. How about you, Deb?
Yeah, I feel that shame is definitely a huge proponent. I know for me, I'm Haitian American, and sometimes there can be a little bit of secrecy that can be involved because of shame and feeling like it's our fault when instances of abuse happen, even though it's not. And I think really having that education and really having that knowledge and other people that you're comfortable with to share your story and to share your experiences really empower us to be able to go beyond and to really find that community and to engage with healing.
And finally, okay.
Yeah, I think I would definitely echo what Kat said about I think a big reason people don't speak up is because they just don't understand that they're experiencing abuse or don't know that they are, because they aren't able to recognize those warning signs. I know for me, I wish I would have known more about healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships earlier on, because I think that would have saved me some heartbreak. But I also think there's a fear of not being believed or dismissed by friends or parents or guardians as kind of like it's just puppy love, or, you know, it couldn't be a serious relationship because you're so young, or not understanding the gravity of how much it really can impact people. And I also think there can be a fear of retaliation, whether it's from the person that they're dating or even, you know, getting in trouble with parents. I know I wasn't really encouraged to date, you know, in high school, so I would be worried about sharing a relationship with my parents because I knew that that's something that they weren't particularly supportive of. And I also think people can be embarrassed about the abuse or thinking that they somehow are to blame, which is why it's so important for us to reassure people that it's not their fault. And again, news travels really fast in schools. And so I think people are concerned about speaking up because they don't want rumors to start, or they don't want to lose friendships, or maybe, you know, it's really cool to be in a relationship. And so they don't want to have that fear of getting broken up with as well.
I do just want to go back just a little bit. Kat, I know you mentioned that you didn't recognize that you were in an unhealthy or abusive relationship. If you're comfortable, what one of those red flags that you noticed that kind of ring that bell that maybe this is unhealthy or abusive? Because I know so many individuals, they don't recognize, and so they don't really know all the signs to look for as well.
Yeah. I think back to one of my relationships in high school, and one of the instances that would happen was my ex would plan either a surprise or a really good, just like something really fun, like bring me flowers or something like that. But then if I didn't cooperate in that moment, and if I didn't react the way he wanted me to, he immediately took it back. He immediately blamed me for causing problems. And it was very, very, very obvious that those gifts were not given out of love. They were given because he was trying to get something. And that really didn't resonate as a red flag to me, because I thought I was in the wrong. It was, oh, my boyfriend just did this really nice thing for me, and yeah, I was late. I didn't show up on time. That was a me fail. And so because I thought that, like, and that's kind of all it was for me in the moment, and it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, that's actually like a really big problem, and I hope he figures that out by the time he graduates from high school. But yeah, so that's an example of something that specifically happened to me when I was dating as a teenager.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and I hope you figured it out too. But speaking of open conversations, how can we also encourage our young people to continue to open up and have these conversations about boundaries in a way to feel safe in all facets? Wayne.
Yeah, so it's so important that everyone feels safe, when talking about healthy relationships and boundaries because relationships affect everyone. And so I think one of the ways to make sure that everyone feels safe is by using inclusive language because everyone deserves to be in a healthy relationship. And so using inclusive language can help assert that, no one should have to feel like they're excluded from these very, very important conversations. And then when talking about boundaries, I think it's crucial to acknowledge that boundaries are going to look different for everyone. And that can get really tricky. So it's important to talk about that because people in one relationship may be comfortable with something that people in another relationship aren't. And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. So that's why it's important to recognize those different boundaries and talk about them.
I like you highlighting that some people feel different about certain boundaries because that just comes back to the individualism and the uniqueness about bringing two people that are individuals together. How about you, Kat?
Yeah, I think normalizing boundaries and also having a good understanding of what they are. At one point, I thought boundaries were, hey, you have to behave this way towards me. But a boundary is my actions, what I'm gonna do. And so I think we should start, this is my opinion, but I've liked thinking about boundaries the same way we think about allergies, right? Like I can bring you a cupcake, but if you're allergic to gluten, it's your job to say no and keep yourself healthy and keep yourself safe. And so I think kind of having bringing the word boundaries to light and kind of normalizing it and making sure we have that understanding that, hey, if I don't take your cupcake, I'm not punishing you. I'm not necessarily like going against you. I'm just doing what I need to do to keep myself safe.
I like that. I've never heard that before, but that was good. How about you, Deb?
Yeah, Kat, that was such a great analogy. And I think it's really important because I feel like when it comes to boundaries, people can feel like, oh, I'm being selfish or I'm being rude towards other people. But boundaries are for us. Boundaries are the landmark for us to feel comfortable and to have what we need, and is not a restriction to harm other people, is not an attempt to restrict other people, but to make sure that we're comfortable and that we're safe. And I feel like when it comes to youth, it's so important for us to be empowered through that so that we are having the relationships that are healthy for us and that are filled with love. And I think when it comes to just accessibility when talking about these concepts, being accessible is so crucial. We live in such an age where there's just so much different technology that exists. We have social media with the council and we use TikTok, we use Instagram to really engage with people, and we have quizzes online and different functions so that people can know, hey, am I in a healthy relationship or in between or an unhealthy relationship? And I feel like really meeting people where they are is just so crucial so that they can know the information. And if they don't know, they can utilize that and utilize their autonomy to get the access that they need and to have the relationships that are loving because everybody deserves a loving relationship at the end of the day.
Yes, period. I also, every time I give a presentation and I talk about love and respect, I talk about the different quizzes that they are able to take to be able to identify those different kind of relationships. So those of you that are on, that's an incredible resource as well. And to finish off this question, Kate.
Yeah, I think when it comes to talking about boundaries, it's really important to include them in like everyday life and just teaching respect for you and your personal space, not just in like a relationship lens, but also just in like a personal way. Apply it to how do you set boundaries in friendships? How do you set boundaries around family and like being able to talk about it in an everyday sense and not just talking about boundaries in a relationship or when there's already been abuse. And so I think including those lessons, in everyday life is really important, and normalizing talking about that in both romantic and platonic relationships in a way that's really supportive and non-judgmental and inclusive, as we kind of been talking about. And I think things that I really liked when I was learning about boundaries is things like role playing or even discussion guides to kind of help conversations feel less intimidating. I also think it's really helpful to use like pop culture or celebrities as an example, because it's really like personal and vulnerable to use like your own examples. So if you're able to talk about, a story that happened to someone, like a celebrity or in the news, I think that can kind of help foster those conversations as well. And I also really liked it when we could have like peer-led conversations, because I think students and young people are more likely to listen to their peers or someone in like an older grade versus an adult. Because I remember those kind of conversations that I got to have really resonated with me. So being able to foster those opportunities where students can talk to each other, or older students in a higher grade can talk to students in a younger grade, I think can be really impactful as well.
Yes, and that kind of leads into my next question, about being able to navigate and have those conversations. Sometimes I feel like there's kind of this barrier between kind of our communities and our school systems where we ultimately spend the most time in being able to provide this education and prevention around dating abuse. How can schools and communities better support young people with understanding and preventing dating abuse? Start with Colleen.
I think one of the ways schools and communities can better support youth in understanding and preventing dating abuse is by presenting information a little differently, because, a lot of people, it's lectures, assemblies, which have tons of great information, but young people attention spans are getting smaller and shorter. And so I think like presenting it in a more casual way, like informational posters, where you have to see them, but you don't have to sit for an hour and listen to someone, or stickers, because everyone loves stickers, So I think implementing more simple and practical options would be great, but they still have the information that you're trying to get out there.
Let me tell you, sometimes I go and give presentations to high schools and then have to turn around and give presentations to elementary students, and the attention span kindergarten and sometimes fifth grade is something. So you're correct. What else can we do?
Yeah, I'm getting a degree right now in music education, and so I'm constantly thinking about what's happening in our schools. And one thing that I think is really, really important is the example that we have as teachers. And so if we really, and the effect that we have on our students and on our community is huge. And so if we can kind of, being able to help target teachers in just use it in your lingo, talk about it in your classrooms, have boundaries in your personal life, and have boundaries with your students so that they can see and you can model healthy relationships and healthy boundaries, and be respectful in how you talk about your personal relationships, and be respectful with your students, and give your classrooms and your school and your community a safe place, and be a safe person, because our teachers are sometimes with our kids more than parents are. And so going straight to that as a really, really big source, and really utilizing our teachers as one of those biggest resources, I think would be a really, really strong step in utilizing boundaries and having support from schools and community.
Absolutely. And that being said, I just want to throw something out that was said to me one time that really stuck. And it's that common thing that we hear, especially, and this is with kids, where maybe a little boy is being super mean to a little girl, and the excuse of, oh, he dislikes you, is thrown out. So even within the terminology of teachers, ensuring that we're not validating that behavior with something that says, oh, this is like last love, in that way that could progress as they get older. How about you, Deb?
Yeah, I believe in the power of creativity and interactivity. I think just within the spaces that we are now, just like what was mentioned earlier, attention spans sort of have gotten shorter with a lot of different forms of media. So I think being really engaging and being really creative in your efforts when sharing about healthy relationships and boundaries is so crucial. And that modeling portion as well, and not repeating old things that were said maybe in the past that are actually really harmful at the end of the day.
Perfect. And we'll wrap it up with, hey.
Yeah, I think having age appropriate like education around healthy relationships is so important. And I think that starts like really early on. So like maybe in elementary school, like let's teach kids about empathy and communication skills and self-esteem. And that's going to create a great building block for maybe in middle school when you talk about like how do we have healthy friendships? And then in high school, talk about how do we have healthy romantic relationships? Because I think for me, the only education I got about healthy relationships was like 1 week in high school where we watched a video that showed like physical abuse, and that was it. And I think it's so important to be able to, start having those building blocks again of having good communication skills and self-confidence so much earlier on so that you can build into, how do we have healthy platonic relationships and then healthy romantic relationships. And I also think just having schools be able to provide resources such as counselors or information on the hotline is really helpful. And again, I think just having peer-led programs where students can talk to each other and learn from each other is really important too. But again, being able to have all of the building blocks for, having a healthy self before we talk about having a healthy relationship is really going to be impactful too.
Absolutely. And a big part of that comes back to that individualism, ensuring that you're building yourself up, preparing yourself to know specifically what you want in relationships before we're getting into them. That way you're not changing what your eye is on the prize when you get there. So that is what I have for you. Thank you all so much. You are all amazing and doing such incredible work. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Guys, y'all never cease to amaze me. Y'all just never cease to amaze me. And the common theme that I was hearing is boundaries. Boundaries are yours to build. It starts with you first. Kate said it. Deb said it. All of you all, Kat, all of you all said it. And I love that metaphor. But also when we're thinking about breaking the silence, and let's stop and pause for a moment and go back to our theme, respect that. What does that look like when we're encouraging young people to speak up? We all talked about some reasons why they wouldn't speak up, but we also talked about some things that can make them comfortable in speaking up, like going to loveisrespect.org and looking and trying out some of our quizzes. Because sometimes it's uncomfortable. Kate, you just shared about it. You didn't want to share with your family that you was in a relationship. I'm not suggesting that you keep secrets, but this is just life that young people have to deal with, right? Or maybe joining a youth council like you all did and having a platform like this webinar to be able to speak. But I think it's also important for us to realize that, and I heard a couple of you all say that too, that when you had something that came into school, it was specifically around physical abuse, right? But there's so many different types of abuse. A relationship exists on a spectrum from healthy, I say it all the time, like in the beginning, you're like, oh, I love you. Yeah, you love me. Butterflies and all of those good things, right? And then at the end, it's abusive. But on the spectrum, what about that middle? And that's basically what you all have been talking about, that unhealthy aspect. Am I saying once someone calls you 4 times in 30 minutes, you should end the relationship? That's not what I'm saying. It's about the pattern of behavior, right? So if we set a boundary and say, hey, I was really hanging out with my friends and really into this. And then when you contacted me and kept calling me, I thought something was wrong. You wasn't respecting my boundaries. You're respecting yourself and you're asking for respect, right? I love that. So now I want to shift. Alexis really had one point of direction that she was going. But when we think about the abuse types, like physical, and I could ask y'all to come off the mute and say it, but I'm going to say it for you. Physical, digital, right? Emotional, verbal, sexual. When we think about these abuse types, and when we think about breaking the silence and really just like chopping it up with your friends or having a little conversation with your friends, how often do we talk about financial abuse? Because one of the things that I think young people need to realize is that can affect your life after the relationship. And we've talked about that. So I want to switch a little bit and just talk a little bit about financial abuse. And when I say talk a little bit about it, and I'll start with you, I should have asked Alexis this question as well, and I may still do, but I'm gonna start with you, Kate. Um, what do you think are some misconceptions young people like have about the role of money in a relationship? You know, because everybody probably is not saying, oh, financial abuse, but and how can we challenge that? Do you think that a lot of young people, or even yourself or your friends, have even addressed that before? Or how does
Yeah, I
that work?
think Yeah, I think it's definitely one that doesn't get talked about enough. And I think that's because, like, one of the misconceptions is maybe that financial control or dependence is just seen as normal or even like romantic in relationships. I think I hear a lot of like, oh, he takes care of me, or, things like that, where it's like, oh, well, but he's actually just controlling all of your money. Or even like a misconception that financial abuse doesn't count as abuse or isn't as serious as other forms of abuse. And I
Mhm.
think that's where we can really, challenge that misconception just by continuing to educate people about, financial independence, healthy financial communication, and how control over money can be used as a form of manipulation or power. And so, just continuing to promote the idea that healthy relationships involve, mutual respect and shared responsibility, even when it comes to money and resources. And I also want to recognize too that a lot of young people might not have much of an income. I know I really didn't have much money growing up. And so I think this can also be seen in like controlling family resources too.
Mm.
Like saying, if you don't do what I want you to, like, I'm not going to let you come join my family for dinner. Or if you don't do what I want you to, like, I'm not going to let you join my family on this experience.
Yeah.
And so I think there can also be that element of, resources as well, especially in young people who don't have like an income per se. But I
Yeah.
also think it can be seen in, the fear of exposing someone's financial status too as a way to kind of use control over them.
Well said. You know, and basically there's so many layers to it, right? But if we're talking about breaking the silence, how do we start having these conversations just with our friends? You never know what might come up, right? And it might be a concern, and then we can call it out. We don't, at Love is Respect and even the National Domestic Violence Hotline, we don't tell our contacts what to do, but it's just like you say, Kate, we educate them and empower them with the information to make healthy decisions that support them. What about you, Lean? Do you, and y'all let me know if you need me to repeat the question because I have no problem with that.
So I would say a common misconception about financial abuse in relationships is that financial abuse only exists in, like married couples or low-income households. But, the reality is that financial abuse can exist in any relationship, and it does. It exists in all types of different relationships. And I think we need to recognize that more because it can affect anyone, regardless of your income or, this or that.
Absolutely. And one, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. And it's a great answer because it came from you. I want you to know that, all of you, I'm going to give you your props regardless. But also, like, what does that look like in a relationship with someone who's 17, 18, or 19? Like, an example of that could be every time you go out, you're paying for it. And they say, I'm going to pay you back, but they never pay you back. And again, it's not the first time, it's recognizing. Somebody said in chat, I'm sorry, I got to acknowledge that gold digger. But it's recognizing the pattern before it gets bad, before they open up a credit card and boom, your credit score. I know I didn't even think about a credit score until I got older out of that abusive relationship, but it was too late. I had to rebuild. What about you, Deb? What do you think are some misconceptions young people have about the role of money in relationships?
Yeah, I think also too, like the connections of like how some people are raised to and the different beliefs that we're raised in. I think sometimes if we are seeing a model of financial abuse through maybe our parents or through cousins or family members, we can sometimes normalize that and think that's a normal thing and have
Mhm.
those ideas also continue on within our platonic relationships, within our romantic relationships. And I think that education piece is so important because a lot of times we don't know, and not everyone has the opportunity to get financial literacy or education about financials. And when they finally are ready for that, it may be too late and they realize, oh my goodness, my credit score is now horrible because
Yeah.
of the relationship I was in a couple years ago and they were utilizing my funds or even vice versa. So I think that's really crucial to look at too, all of our relationships in tandem and how they connect and influence one another.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And again, it goes back to that manipulation. It goes back to that power and control. An example, as simple as showing up at your job and you end up getting fired or telling you, no, you can't work because I love you so much and I need to be around you. That job is interfering with our relationship, showering you with gifts. Y'all talked about it earlier with Alexis questions, form of love bombing. But and then using and Kat, I want you to answer this question next. Using the gifts and all these different things that they gave you and taking it back as a punishment because you didn't respond the way they felt you should respond. What about you, Kat?
Yeah, I think a really big misconception about financial abuse is that it doesn't really matter if you love someone. Is, oh, of course I would buy you this for you. I love you. Oh, of course I would do this for you. I love you. But the problem is even if you are giving out of the sheer goodness of your heart, that doesn't mean that they're not taking from you.
Yeah.
And I really I loved what Deb said about how there are just a lot of people who don't even have access to financial literacy, and that can really be a problem especially if they're in a financially abusive situation. And so really, really making sure that we are, yeah, just doubling down on empowerment and education, especially when it comes to personal finances, because the stronger understanding that I have of my own finances and of how I'm not in a relationship right now, so I don't got to worry about no one else's. So
Yeah.
this is my time to worry about mine, figure my stuff out so that when I get into that relationship, if someone else comes in and tries to take over, I already know what I'm talking about. I already know what's mine. I already know how to delegate that. And then
Absolutely.
as that relationship progresses, we can figure out how to do that in a healthy way. But it has to start with personal understanding. Otherwise, I'm going to be a lot easier to take advantage of, and I'm going to be a lot more susceptible to that kind of abuse and manipulation if I don't understand how money works, how it can be used against me. And yeah, and in the instance when my ex was giving me things and then taking them away, it was placing monetary value on our relationship.
Mhm.
And that's, I can go work for money. I'm not in a relationship for money. Like, I'm trying to find, like, I want love. I want respect. Like, money will figure itself out. Like, and so it's just, my relationship cannot be bought. My love cannot be bought. And when people have tried to do that, it is very, very unhealthy and rare. Doesn't have good effects. It doesn't.
It's hurtful, right? It's hurtful. It can cause indecisiveness. It can cause low self-esteem. It can cause pressure. We did an impact survey a few years ago, and one of the questions was, who do young people go to talk about relationship situations, right? And believe it or not, they said another peer. So being able to educate yourself and being able to spread awareness, like you all are ambassadors, you can have that conversation. But also, honesty without compassion is cruelty. So we're not going to be calling people names. That's a whole nother webinar for me to get into pop culture, right? And how that affects relationships in an unhealthy way, right? But acknowledging, like, I love the conversation starters that Kate was talking about. Like, it's so many different pieces and layers, but an individual, boundaries are yours to build. Just because Kat feels like her boundary wasn't crossed, does that mean that Angela's boundary wasn't valid? And it's important for us to remember that. So the last question, y'all, how you feeling? And we're going to stay on this topic. We're going to stay on this topic. So I heard somebody talk about earlier, peer to peer, right? Remember we had the leadership event in person. Y'all were able to work together. Y'all were able to come up with presentations. You had sessions where you learned. What advice, and we're staying on the topic of financial abuse, would you give someone, whether that's your friend or your peer, right, who feels ashamed? Because that's a big piece, or even scared about speaking up about financial abuse because they feel that they probably will not be believed or even judged. I'm going to start with Deb.
Yeah, I would tell that friend there's power in the words that you share and there's power in your story. And that I think it's really brave to really speak on that because when it comes to financials in general, people are very secretive about it. It's something that's very hush hush. And I know that growing up for me, I've been told like to not share my business when it comes to money, whether it's through financial abuse or through how much I get paid or anything
Yeah.
between those perimeters. So I would
Yeah.
really tell them like thank you for even sharing that with me and asking them like, hey, like are there certain steps that you want to take together to help get that support if you want that? Because I'm a strong believer in making sure that people make their decisions when it comes to any type of situation that they're in and really amplifying and making sure that they feel empowered in the decisions that they decide to choose at the end of the day.
I love that. Power. I love that. Lean?
I would start by um, just affirming them that whatever they experienced or witnessed in regards to financial abuse is valid, and that I do believe it happened. And because validating, experiences of abuse, especially these lesser known types of abuse, like financial abuse, is so important. And just having one or two people validate your experiences can make all the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the reasons I didn't speak up when I was 16, 17, and 18. One, I didn't think I would be believed. One, I felt ashamed. And one, I didn't feel that I would be validated based on the way I was raised, you know? Yeah. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I know when I experienced financial abuse in one of my relationships, once I learned and realized what it was, I felt incredibly like embarrassed and like ashamed of myself that I didn't realize that's what it was sooner. So my advice to other people or what I would, you know, share with someone who's going through the same thing is just by reaffirming that it's not their fault and, reminding them that financial abuse is a form of control, going back to that education, but also just encouraging people to, speak out, and knowing that when you do speak up, it can kind of break that cycle of abuse and really empower someone to regain their independence. And so I would definitely reassure them that there are people, whether it's, friends or counselors or the hotline, who will listen to them without judgment, and offer support, because it is a very vulnerable thing to seek support for. And I would also just, kind of offer the idea that seeking help is a sign of strength and not of weakness. And to tie it back to kind of where we started, I think that, abuse thrives in silence. And so breaking the silence can really help protect themselves and others too, if they're able to speak out about it.
Well said. Thank you. And the last person to give their perspective on what they would share with a peer or a friend is our wonderful Kat.
Yeah, I think if I had a friend come to me about financial abuse, I've been mentioning this. The number one thing I would talk to them about is personal education and personal empowerment. And Kate, thank you for sharing about how you didn't know, and then you did, and you felt embarrassed. But the important thing was that you learned, right? And the more we can have other people that have experiences where, even if they're in a situation, we can always learn, and we can always change, and we can always make different choices. And I think, especially for young people, having conversations about money, and I would recommend having conversations about money with someone before you get into a relationship with them, making sure, hey, what's your relationship with money like? What's my relationship with money like? What are the how are we going to handle finances in our relationship? And making sure you have that conversation before the relationship can really, really help avoid being blindsided, avoid being taken advantage of. And even though people can, change their minds and still take advantage of you with that conversation, you may be able to make discernments or make different choices based off of what you learn in a conversation like that before choosing to dive into headfirst into a relationship and start combining all of your finances. And that's, I think that's the advice that I would give, is make sure you understand your money, you are empowered, and you are good with it, and that you have a really fair understanding of your partner's financial literacy and the way that they handle money before you get into a committed relationship.
Very well said. I want to thank, first of all, my co-facilitator, Alexis. You are amazing. You're doing amazing things. I'm grateful that you are a survivor, and you're taking your experience and you're using it to empower other young people and even older adults, because older adults are still trying to figure out what a healthy relationship is as well, right? Lean, Deb, Kate, and Kat, it's always a pleasure to share space with you all. I really want to encourage anyone who because I've seen some really good questions that pop up, to really send it to our link that we put there. Please go to loveisrespect.org and go to our Teen DVAM, TDVAM, or either Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and go to our calendar of events. We have more live events coming up this week, Friday, as a matter of fact. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for allowing our young people to break the silence and really talk about some real life issues that are happening. And thank you for allowing me to share space with you all too. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Gretchen. Alexis, is there anything you wanted to say before I turn it back over to Gretchen? I apologize.
No, you're great. The quote I always leave everyone is to turn your wounds into wisdom. And if you can't find the wisdom on your own, there are so many people in your community, so many different individuals that are willing to help you find it as well. So never let the adversity define you. You are capable of all things. Thank you.
I love that. I'm going to take that for myself. And now we'll turn it back over. Youth Council members, any last words? always want to make sure you feel like you have a platform, but really want to know. Ling, somebody said your cat is adorable.
I think for me, oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think it's so important. I just want to thank everyone for coming onto this webinar. Like, no is a full sentence. My mom used to work at a domestic violence shelter in West Pennsylvania, and she would always tell my sister and I that. And I think that's something that I always carry with me. And as we navigate relationships throughout our whole entire lives, it's just so important for us to realize that we come first, and regardless of any negative stigmas or comments that people want to make, we have the right to experience joy in our lives and to have fulfilling relationships. And if that means saying no a lot of times to get that, then you have the right to say that. And you should never feel ashamed for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I don't think I can end it better than that. So just want to say thank you to our incredible moderators and our wonderful youth council members. The activity in this session has been incredible. There were many questions that came through the Q&A, which I answered in the chat. If there's a way that we can share that via the follow-up email that will come to you all, we'll see if we can do that. But thank you all. It was wonderful to have you here today. Thank you to the participants. We hope you download the Team DVAM action pack listed on the Love is Respect work website. I'm sorry, I can't talk today. And take action in your own communities. Please share with us on social media what you're doing to raise awareness, and we hope you join us for our next session later this month in our IG Live. So, Ms. Kansas, Angela, all the youth council members, you're incredible. Our interpreters, you're also amazing as well. Thank you, everyone. Go forth and have a fabulous day. Take care.